The ocean hides dangers that strike without warning. From a great white mauling a woman on a sea bob in California, to a blacktip attacking a paddleboarder in South Carolina. From a cage dive turning into horror at the Farallon Islands, to a white tip striking fishermen after a capsized boat, and from a Coast Guard officer losing his hand to a great white to a surfer in Hawaii, mauled by a tiger shark. These encounters show how deadly the sea can be. Watch till the end. These true stories will leave you shocked. On July 19, 2025, Monterey Bay in California shimmered under the summer sun, its waters calm and inviting. Among the visitors that day was Rachel Simmons, a 29-year-old American known for her adventurous lifestyle. Rachel grew up in Colorado, far from the ocean, but her love for the outdoors began in childhood. She spent her younger years hiking trails, climbing peaks, and filming her experiences on a small camera she carried everywhere. After moving to California in her early 20s, she turned her passion into a personal vlog, sharing her explorations of the state's diverse landscapes. Her audience grew steadily, drawn to her fearless attitude and willingness to try sports that blended speed, danger, and beauty. Rachel had recently taken an interest in marine activities, inspired by the vast coastline and kelp forests near her new home. She was especially captivated by the Sea Bob, a sleek watercraft designed for gliding both above and below the surface. It allowed her to weave through underwater terrain while recording striking footage for her channel. She had practiced in controlled environments, gaining confidence with the device, and now often ventured into natural waters to capture real-life encounters with marine life. On this particular day, Rachel launched her Sea Bob from the beach, eager to record content among the kelp beds of Monterey Bay. The clear waters sparkled with shafts of sunlight, and fish darted between swaying fronds. Her camera rig was secured to the front of the device, recording every angle as she skimmed and dove. She felt a mix of freedom and control as she maneuvered in wide arcs, testing new movements to impress her viewers. Excited, Rachel pushed farther from shore than usual. The water deepened, and her Sea Bob sliced smoothly above the darker patches where the kelp forest thinned. Her laughter echoed across the surface as she spun in a tight circle, the machine pulling her with precision. She had little reason to suspect that anything dangerous lurked nearby. Beneath her, however, a massive shadow stirred. A great white shark, estimated at more than 14 feet, had been patrolling the area. Drawn by the sudden noise and movement, it closed the distance with terrifying speed. Rachel, focused on her recording, had no warning before the sea erupted. The predator surged upward in a violent burst. Its jaws clamped onto her leg with crushing force, splintering bone and tearing through muscle. Rachel was wrenched sideways, her Sea Bob spinning out of control as her body twisted under the weight of the impact. Shock and pain struck instantly, her scream muffled by the water as red clouds spread into the clear bay. The shark shook its head, thrashing her violently, while the Sea Bob spun in frantic loops. The device collided with kelp and foam, useless against the raw strength of the animal. Rachel flailed, striking out in panic, her blood swirling into thick trails that only heightened the predator's interest. Nearby divers and kayakers noticed the chaos, their eyes widening as the fin cut the surface. They splashed furiously, throwing flotation devices into the water, desperate to break the animal's focus. The water churned with splashes as the kayakers beat the surface, their paddles striking foam to drive the predator away. Rachel's body twisted helplessly in the grip of the powerful jaws, her Sea Bob jerking violently before sinking beneath her. Blood streamed from deep gashes in her leg, turning the clear water into a clouded haze. The predator's strength dragged her down, but the sudden commotion from the nearby rescuers created confusion. The great white released its hold for a moment, circling with wide arcs, its dorsal fin slicing the surface. Rachel floated weakly, her arms flailing as she struggled to stay upright. Pain radiated through her body, every movement costing strength, but instinct pushed her to keep kicking despite the broken bones. Her vision blurred, yet she was dimly aware of the noise around her. One of the divers splashed with a buoy, hurling it into the water between the predator and Rachel. The great white turned sharply, snapping at the object as if testing whether it was prey. That distraction bought precious seconds. A small support boat sped toward the scene, its crew leaning over with ropes and poles. The group of rescuers formed a barrier of sound and splashing, closing in around her. The predator lunged once more, striking the floating Sea Bob that bobbed near the surface. Its teeth tore through plastic, fragments scattering across the waves. the boat crew seized their chance. They reached Rachel, pulling her across the side with every ounce of strength. Her body was limp, her wetsuit shredded, blood still seeping from torn muscle and fractured bones. She gasped as she collapsed onto the deck, seawater spilling from her chest with each ragged breath. The shark circled a final time before vanishing into deeper water, its fins slipping beneath the surface. Relief swept over the group, but the urgency of Rachel's condition left no time to pause. Makeshift bandages were pressed against her wounds, layers of cloth turning red almost instantly. The boat's engine roared as it raced toward the shore, the sound of waves crashing against the hull mixing with her shallow groans. On land, emergency crews rushed her to the hospital. Doctors worked to stabilize her, stitching multiple deep lacerations and setting broken bones. Puncture wounds marked her muscles where teeth had sunk deep, and her leg required hours of surgery. The injuries were severe, but her survival was assured thanks to the rapid actions of those nearby. News of the violent encounter spread quickly, drawing national attention. Experts explained that great whites are apex predators, capable of explosive bursts of power even in shallow coastal waters. They are often drawn to erratic splashing, making devices like sea bobs risky in areas where sharks patrol. Authorities urged caution, reminding visitors that the bay, though beautiful, lies within the natural hunting grounds of these animals. For Rachel, recovery became more than physical. The attack left scars across her body and memories etched in her mind. Her passion for adventure did not vanish, but the reminder of the ocean's raw unpredictability reshaped her perspective. The encounter showed how swiftly a moment of thrill could turn into a fight for life, a reality that left her forever changed. On July 3, 2025, the quiet shoreline of South Carolina was painted with golden light as the sun rose above the horizon. Among those enjoying the calm morning was 25-year-old Lila Carter, a fitness instructor who had built a reputation in her community for her energy and dedication. Lila had grown up near the coast, her childhood marked by long summers spent in the water, learning to swim before she could even ride a bicycle. Her love for the ocean never faded, and as she grew older, she combined her passion for fitness with her admiration for nature, often leading beachside classes and promoting healthy living. Known for her discipline, Lila inspired others with her commitment to balance and strength. Paddleboarding had become one of her favorite activities because it combined exercise with the serenity of the sea. On days when she was not teaching yoga or strength training sessions, she would paddle across the shallow inlets to clear her mind and prepare for the week ahead. For her, mornings like this felt safe and controlled, far from the chaos of crowded beaches or turbulent surf. That morning, the water shimmered under the first rays of sunlight. The inlet was calm, almost mirror-like, broken only by the ripples of Lila's board as she glided smoothly. She kept her pace steady, her muscles working with precision, enjoying the quiet rhythm of the paddle slicing into the surface. The scene appeared idyllic, a perfect example of peace between human and sea. But beneath the surface, unseen and silent, danger approached. A black-tip shark, slender yet powerful, had been patrolling the shallow channel. Known for their speed and bursts of aggression, these sharks often feed close to shore, especially in the early hours when smaller fish are active. Lila's movement on the board and the shadows cast by her paddle caught its attention, pulling the predator closer. Without warning, the water broke apart in a sudden burst. The shark lunged upward, clamping its jaws onto her forearm. The force ripped through skin and muscle, tearing clothing as sharp teeth punctured deep. Shock and agony surged through Lila's body as she toppled from the board, splashing into the inlet. Her instincts took over as she thrashed wildly, kicking and twisting to break free. Blood spread rapidly in the shallow water, creating red streaks that swirled around her limbs. The predator, agitated by the sudden movement and the scent, circled with alarming speed. Each second grew heavier as Lila fought to stay afloat, her injured arm weakening with every motion. Nearby friends, also paddleboarding, saw the scene unfold. Their boards shook as they paddled furiously toward her, splashing with their paddles and hurling flotation devices to create distractions. The shark turned sharply, brushing past the boards with its fin, cutting across the water's surface. Lila tried to cling to her board, her legs kicking against the current while her bloodied arm dragged in the water. The predator's movements grew tighter, circling with bursts of speed that sent waves crashing against her board. The shallow inlet that had once felt safe had become a place of terror in a matter of moments. as the struggle for survival began. The boards of her friends drew closer as the predator's shadow cut another tight circle beneath the surface. Splashes from paddles and flotation devices filled the air, creating confusion that slowed the shark's advances. Lila, trembling and pale, tried to stay above the waterline as blood continued to trail from her injured arm. Every heartbeat sent new waves of pain coursing through her body, but her will to survive pushed her to cling to her board as firmly as she could. The predator darted once more, bumping the underside of the paddleboard, sending it rocking violently. The impact nearly knocked her loose, but the distraction from nearby splashing diverted its attention. It veered sharply and snapped at the floating equipment thrown into the water, foam and plastic tearing apart in its jaws. These frantic moments gave her companions the opportunity to reach her side. They steadied the unstable board, lifting her slowly until she was sprawled across it, her face drained of color. Together they paddled toward the shore with every ounce of energy left in their arms. The inlet felt longer than ever, each stroke filled with desperation. Behind them, the black tip continued to patrol, its fin slicing the surface but no longer lunging forward. It circled briefly, as though deciding whether to pursue, before slipping back into deeper water. The relief was fragile, for the danger still felt close as long as the sea surrounded them. By the time they reached the sand, others on the beach had noticed the commotion and rushed to help. Lila was carried carefully from her board, her wetsuit torn and soaked with blood. Deep lacerations lined her forearm, with bone fractures clearly visible beneath the shredded flesh. Makeshift bandages were applied with towels, pressed firmly against the wounds as they waited for emergency responders. The calm morning had turned into a scene of urgency, with cries for help echoing across the shoreline. Paramedics arrived swiftly, loading her onto a stretcher and rushing her to the nearest hospital. Surgeons worked for hours to clean the punctures, close the torn tissue, and repair broken bones. The injuries were severe but treatable, and the quick actions of those nearby had prevented her from losing too much blood before help arrived. Doctors explained that recovery would take months, with rehabilitation needed to restore full strength and mobility in her arm. The story of the incident spread quickly, reaching headlines across the region. Many were shocked that such a dramatic encounter had taken place in a shallow inlet, a place considered safe for casual recreation. Experts explained that blacktip sharks, though smaller than other species, are fast and unpredictable, often mistaking sudden movement for prey. Even calm coastal waters can become dangerous when predators are nearby, especially during early morning hours when they are most active. For Lila, the experience became a defining moment in her life. Her passion for fitness and the ocean did not disappear, but her outlook on risk changed forever. The scars on her arm became reminders of survival, and the memory of that morning served as a lasting lesson. She returned to teaching fitness after her recovery, but she approached the sea with new caution, knowing how quickly serenity could turn into a struggle against one of nature's swiftest hunters. On October 22, 2023, the waters around the Farallon Islands off California shimmered under a sharp morning sun. For many, this stretch of ocean was feared for its deep connection with apex predators, but for Ethan Ward, 34, it was a place of fascination. A marine biologist by profession, Ethan had dedicated his adult life to the study of sharks. He was widely respected among colleagues for his work on predator migration patterns, and had spent years documenting the behaviors of species that most people only saw in nightmares. His research was published in leading journals, and his name often appeared in conversations about ocean conservation. From his early days in Maine, Ethan's fascination with the ocean had never faded. As a child, he watched documentaries for hours, dreaming of being the one behind the camera instead of in front of a screen. When he wasn't in the classroom or the lab, he was in the water, combining science with photography. His lens captured the smallest reef fish to the largest marine mammals, each frame a piece of a bigger puzzle about the balance of life in the sea. His drive made him not just a researcher but also an adventurer, constantly pushing boundaries to better understand the predators most avoided. That morning, the expedition team lowered a cage into the cold water near the islands. The sea was alive with motion. Seals darted in the distance, and seabirds circled overhead, their calls echoing against the rocky cliffs. Below, shadows moved with unsettling purpose. The team had already spotted dorsal fins cutting across the waves, proof that the great whites were near. For Ethan, this was the perfect moment to capture the power of these animals up close, a chance to collect images for both research and public education. Once inside the cage, he steadied himself, the weight of his equipment secured as he leaned over carefully to photograph the circling giants. Each pass of a shark sent a rush through his body, a reminder of both danger and awe. The animals moved with precision, their size immense but their motion controlled, a balance of grace and menace. Then, in an instant, everything changed. From below, a massive great white erupted with terrifying speed, its body slamming into the steel bars of the cage. The impact reverberated through the water, shaking Ethan and his partner with violent force. Metal groaned, and before anyone could react, one of the bars snapped entirely. The sudden gap exposed Ethan's leg, leaving him vulnerable. The predator lunged again, jaws clamping onto him with bone-crushing strength. He thrashed desperately as pain tore through his body, bubbles rushing from his mouth as blood spilled into the water. The cage bent and twisted under the strain while the shark shook him violently, each motion threatening to pull him fully into its grip. Panic surged as his partner struck at the water, signaling desperately to the crew above. What had begun as a controlled dive had erupted into chaos, with Ethan's life hanging in the balance. The predator thrashed with relentless strength, twisting Ethan's body against the bent frame of the cage. Each violent shake spread fresh blood into the water, clouding the visibility and sending smaller fish scattering into the distance. The broken steel groaned under the force, bending inward as though it could collapse entirely. Ethan's hands clawed at the bars, trying to hold himself steady as waves of pain rippled through his leg. His dive partner moved frantically, striking the surface of the water with a pole while signaling with desperate urgency toward the boat above. On the deck, crew members reacted at once. Ropes were pulled taut and the winch groaned as it began hauling the cage upward. The ascent felt agonizingly slow in the chaos below. The shark struck again, tugging Ethan downward while his body jerked violently against the pull of the cage. For long seconds, the outcome seemed inevitable, the force of the animal threatening to drag him completely free of the bars. Then, with a sudden shift, the predator loosened its grip. Perhaps the splashing from above or the vibrations of the cage distracted it, but its jaws released, leaving Ethan free, though mangled and limp. He floated inside the cage, blood pouring from deep gashes as his partner pressed close, holding him steady against the remaining bars. Above, the cage finally broke the surface, and crew members reached in, pulling both men onto the deck with urgent hands. Ethan collapsed onto the boards of the boat, his wetsuit shredded and his leg torn with jagged wounds. His breathing came in rapid bursts, chest heaving as he struggled to stay conscious. Towels, ropes, and whatever fabric could be found were pressed against the injuries to slow the bleeding. The predator that had nearly ended his life circled just below, its dorsal fin cutting across the water before vanishing into the depths. The boat sped toward shore, its engine straining as waves crashed against the hull. Medical personnel met them at the dock, rushing Ethan to a hospital where surgeons worked to close punctured muscles, repair fractured bones, and clean the deep lacerations that threatened infection. Hours passed in the operating room before his condition stabilized. The verdict was severe but survivable. The attack had left him with permanent scars and a long road to recovery. News of the event spread quickly, drawing widespread attention. Videos and photographs of the scene were replayed, sparking debates about the risks of cage diving near areas known for aggressive great whites. Authorities suspended tours at the Farallon Islands, citing both safety concerns and the need to review protocols. Marine experts pointed out that even controlled dives carry unpredictable danger, especially when animals of such size and strength are involved. For Ethan, the ordeal reshaped his life and his career. Though he survived, the memory of being trapped and torn inside the cage never faded. Rehabilitation demanded months of effort, and the scars on his body became lasting reminders of how thin the line is between control and chaos in the ocean. His work as a biologist continued, but he spoke often about the limits of human safety in predator territory, using his experience as a warning that even the best precautions cannot remove all risk when facing one of nature's most powerful hunters. On July 25, 2025, the Florida Straits shimmered under an uneasy sky, clouds forming in the distance as two fishermen made their way across the restless waters. Among them was Cameron Vera, a 36-year-old man who had grown up in coastal Florida with a lifelong bond to the sea. Fishing was not only his livelihood, but also his passion. Known for his patience and calm demeanor, Cameron had built a reputation among locals as someone who could read the tides and anticipate the behavior of the ocean like second nature. His family often spoke proudly of his determination, recalling how he had worked on boats since his teenage years, eventually buying his own small skiff. On that morning, Cameron set out with a close friend, planning a routine trip. Their skiff, small but sturdy, cut across the waters as they prepared for several hours of fishing. Cameron enjoyed these quiet outings where the hum of the motor and the steady rhythm of waves formed a backdrop to his thoughts. He had always respected the unpredictability of the sea, but his experience gave him confidence. Still, nature has a way of reminding even the most seasoned mariner how powerless humans can be. As the day stretched, winds picked up, and the ocean grew restless. Dark clouds rolled in faster than expected, and soon the first heavy drops of rain struck the deck. The fishermen tightened their grips on the rails, steering carefully through the rising swells. Within moments, a squall engulfed them. Waves rose higher, crashing over the bow, drenching the men and swamping the small boat. The skiff rocked violently, struggling against the torrent. Then a massive swell lifted the vessel before slamming it sideways, capsizing it completely. Both men were hurled into the turbulent sea. Saltwater filled Cameron's mouth as he fought to surface, his arms flailing until his hands found the overturned hull of the skiff. He clung to it with desperate strength, coughing and gasping as waves continued to batter him. His friend, thrown further away, managed to grab hold of a tangled fishing net, wrapping it around his arm for buoyancy. The storm raged above them, thunder cracking and lightning splitting the horizon, the roar of nature drowning out everything else. As they struggled to stay afloat, another presence stirred below. Drawn by the chaos and vibrations of the storm, a large oceanic white-tipped shark emerged from the depths. Known for its persistence and boldness in open waters, the predator circled the capsized skiff with calculated movements. Cameron felt the shift in the water before he saw the fin slicing through the surface. His heart pounded, the realization sinking in that their fight was no longer only against the storm. Without hesitation, the shark surged forward, its jaws clamping down on Cameron's leg. Pain exploded through his body as flesh tore under the crushing bite. He thrashed violently, kicking and striking, trying to free himself as blood clouded the water. The predator bit again, shaking him with terrifying force. Each second stretched endlessly as Cameron fought against both the storm above and the hunter below. The sea boiled with red as Cameron twisted against the predator's grip. His body jolted with every violent pull, but instinct drove him to fight. He kicked wildly, striking the powerful head until the shark released him for a moment. He scrambled back against the overturned skiff, clutching the slippery surface with trembling arms. His leg throbbed with sharp pain, blood flowing freely into the surrounding water. The predator was not done. It circled again, brushing its rough skin against the hull, testing and waiting. Nearby, his friend clung to the net, shouting for attention that vanished in the roar of the storm. He splashed and thrashed to draw the shark away, each movement filled with fear but also desperation to keep Cameron alive. The shark darted toward the disturbance, snapping at the floating net and tearing it apart. The man managed to kick free, gulping for air as foam and spray filled his face. The distraction gave Cameron precious seconds to press his hands against his shredded leg, trying to stem the bleeding while bracing against the waves. The squall showed no mercy. Walls of water crashed around them, the overturned boat rolling under the force. Both men struggled to keep their grip as exhaustion set in. The predator continued circling, its fin-cutting slow patterns on the surface. Every approach brought fresh terror, every pass a reminder that the ordeal was far from over. For nearly 20 minutes, the storm and shark together pushed them to their limits, leaving them drained and gasping. At last, the fury of the weather began to ease. The black clouds shifted, allowing faint shafts of sunlight to pierce the surface of the water. The waves, while still heavy, no longer towered as high. Through the clearing spray, the sound of an engine grew louder. A patrol boat scanning the area after reports of the squall spotted the overturned skiff. Rescuers rushed forward, shouting over the water as they maneuvered close. Poles and flotation devices were extended, reaching the two battered men. Cameron's friend was pulled aboard first, his arms scraped and raw but otherwise intact. Then attention turned to Cameron. Blood poured from his leg, staining the deck as hands gripped him firmly and hauled him out of the sea. He collapsed onto the boards of the patrol boat, his face pale and his body shaking violently. Towels and straps were pressed against the wounds, each second critical as the crew sped toward shore. Hours later, in a hospital room, surgeons worked tirelessly to repair the damage. Deep lacerations, punctured muscles, and fractured bones left his leg mangled, but it was saved. Recovery would demand months of care, and the scars would remain as permanent reminders. Yet survival itself was a victory, owed to his determination, his friends' bravery, and the timing of the rescue. News of the ordeal spread quickly, highlighting once more the dangers of oceanic whitetips in open waters. Experts explained that these sharks are opportunistic, often appearing during storms or near stranded vessels when humans are at their most vulnerable. The incident served as a stark reminder of the razor-thin line between adventure and tragedy at the sea. For Cameron, the memory of that day would never fade. The pain, the fear, and the endless struggle in the storm left their mark, shaping the rest of his life. He returned to fishing after a long recovery, but always with caution, carrying scars that told the story of how close he had come to being lost to the depths. On July 19, 2023, the waters near Monterey Bay, California, reflected the first light of day as the U.S. Coast Guard prepared for a routine coastal patrol. Among the team was Petty Officer Evan Callahan, a 34-year-old serviceman whose life had been built around discipline, duty, and the sea. Evan had spent more than a decade in service, known by his peers for his calm judgment in emergencies and his skill in handling unpredictable environments. His dedication extended beyond his role, as he often volunteered in community outreach programs that taught water safety to young people. To his colleagues, Evan was not only a trusted officer but also a reliable friend who carried both experience and optimism into every mission. Raised in a small town along the Oregon coast, Evan had been drawn to the ocean from a young age. Fishing trips with his father, long afternoons exploring tide pools, and hours watching the horizon had inspired a sense of respect for the sea's beauty and its dangers. Choosing to serve in the Coast Guard felt like a natural path, combining his love of the ocean with a deep sense of responsibility. Over the years, he had earned recognition for his bravery in rescue operations and his precision during high-pressure assignments. By 2023, he was seasoned, confident, and respected by all who served alongside him. That morning, the patrol started smoothly as the crew monitored waters known for seal haulouts and shifting debris. The California coastline was both striking and treacherous, with kelp forests stretching beneath the waves and wildlife thriving in abundance. For Evan, this was familiar territory. His task during the patrol was straightforward: check a drifting buoy reported near shallow water, a task he had performed many times before. Donning his gear, he lowered himself into the water and waded toward the object. The surface appeared calm, but the waters around Monterey Bay were also home to one of the ocean's most feared predators. Below him, shadows moved quietly, drawn by the presence of seals in the area. The buoy floated innocently, bobbing in the gentle swell while Evan focused on his inspection. His colleagues watched from the patrol boat, scanning the horizon and monitoring his progress. Then in an instant, the calm shattered. From below, a massive great white shark erupted with explosive force, its jaws clamping down on Evan's right hand. The impact sent shock through his body, a sudden surge of searing pain that stole his breath. He thrashed violently, trying to free himself, the water erupting into foam and spray as blood poured from the wound. The predator shook its head with terrifying power, tearing through muscle and bone. Metal from his gear scraped against the teeth as the shark pulled, severing his hand in a brutal motion before retreating into the depths. Evan's body convulsed with the trauma as he kicked back toward the surface. The water around him stained red while his stunned colleagues prepared to act. The crew reacted in seconds, pulling Evan through the waves and hauling him over the side of the patrol boat. Blood streamed across the deck as his body trembled from shock. Fellow officers pressed bandages over the mangled arm, applying a tourniquet high on his shoulder to slow the bleeding. The atmosphere on board shifted instantly from routine to life-or-death urgency. Every movement was fast but controlled, a display of training drilled over years of service. The boat surged toward shore at top speed while crew members worked together to keep Evan conscious. His breathing came in gasps, and his uniform was soaked with seawater and blood. Oxygen was given as one officer pressed steady pressure against the wound. Despite the chaos, the team's composure held, each man and woman focused on keeping their colleague alive until medical help could take over. At the harbor, emergency medics were waiting. Evan was lifted onto a stretcher and rushed into an ambulance as locals and visitors looked on in stunned silence. The news spread quickly across the base. One of their most respected petty officers had been struck by a great white during what should have been a routine patrol. Doctors at the hospital moved immediately into surgery. Hours passed as surgeons worked to clean torn tissue, close the lacerations, and stabilize fractured bones. Despite their efforts, the damage was beyond repair. Evan's hand could not be saved. Recovery was long and painful. Weeks in the hospital were followed by months of therapy. The once confident serviceman now faced a life permanently changed. Yet, even through the setbacks, his determination remained. He told his colleagues and friends that the ocean was still a place of respect, not hatred, and he refused to let the attack define only fear. The Coast Guard reviewed the incident carefully. Safety procedures for shallow inspections were revised, with new guidelines put in place to limit risk during swim checks near seal haulouts. The attack also reignited public discussions about shark activity along the California coast. Marine experts noted a rise in sightings that year, explaining that waters near Monterey Bay were prime hunting grounds for large predators drawn by the dense seal population. Though Evan survived, the scars were not only physical. His fellow officers carried the memory of that morning with them, a reminder that even highly trained teams were not beyond the reach of nature's most dangerous creatures. For Evan, the loss of his hand marked the end of his active patrol career, but his leadership and knowledge remained vital. He later shifted into training roles, teaching younger recruits about both survival and respect for the power of the ocean. The incident stood as a sobering moment for the Coast Guard and the wider community. It showed that even in controlled operations, the sea carried risks that could never be fully removed. Evan's resilience and survival became a testament to both human strength and the unpredictable, relentless force of the wild. On July 3, 2021, the sun rose over Maui's north shore, casting warm light across the Pacific. Among the early surfers was Jordan Hayes, a 29-year-old whose life revolved around the ocean. Born and raised in Hawaii, he grew up with saltwater in his veins, learning to balance on a board before he could ride a bike. Surfing was more than a sport to him. It was meditation, challenge, and lifestyle. Friends described him as determined and fearless, always seeking larger swells and perfect breaks. His girlfriend often joined him in the water, sharing not only his passion, but also his trust in the sea. Together, they embraced the rhythm of the waves, chasing the thrill that drew them back each morning. Jordan was known on the island for his strength and skill, often guiding younger surfers through reefs and tricky currents. Though the sea was familiar, he never underestimated its power. That morning, the water appeared calm, the kind of deceptive calm that masked unseen depth. Beneath the glimmering surface, life stirred in silence. The reef stretched into darker water, where shadows drifted quietly in the blue. Jordan paddled forward, eager to catch the next swell, his girlfriend trailing nearby, her board bobbing gently behind. The wave rose suddenly, lifting his board as he steadied himself, bending his knees and leaning into the glide. Foam rushed past as the ocean carried him forward, his movements sharp and practiced. But beneath the board, hidden in the shadows, danger waited. Without warning, a massive tiger shark surged upward, breaking through the water with explosive force. Its jaws clamped onto his calf and thigh, the crushing power tearing through flesh and muscle in a single strike. Jordan's body convulsed as pain ripped through him. He spun violently in the surf, his board whipping sideways while blood clouded the water around him. His girlfriend froze for a second in shock before splashing frantically, trying to divert the predator's focus. The shark released for an instant only to lunge again, ripping deeper into his leg and shredding fabric and skin. The water erupted in red and foam as the predator thrashed, its rough body brushing against the board in chilling proximity. Other surfers on the break saw the chaos and reacted. They paddled furiously, slapping the water with their boards, striking to create confusion. Two of them reached Jordan's side, their arms pulling him toward the surface as the shark veered close, circling once more. The sea seemed to pulse with fear as shouts and splashes filled the air. With combined strength, they heaved him across a paddleboard, his body trembling and slick with blood. Every moment was a race against time as they pushed toward the shallows. Waves crashed over them, dragging them sideways, while the predator lingered behind, its fin slicing the surface before fading into deeper water. The group pressed forward with desperation, Jordan groaning weakly as they neared the lifeguard station, his leg torn and mangled from the brutal ambush. The surfers dragged Jordan onto the sand, his body limp and pale as blood streamed from the wounds in his leg. Lifeguards rushed forward, their training kicking in as they worked swiftly to stop the bleeding. Towels, wraps, and makeshift supports were pressed against the gashes while one lifeguard raised a radio, calling for paramedics. The beach, once filled with calm morning energy, now buzzed with panic and urgency. Jordan's girlfriend knelt close, trembling as she watched rescuers stabilize him. His breathing was shallow, his chest rising and falling with effort. Around them, onlookers gathered, their faces frozen with fear at the sight of the mangled limb. The calm waters that had lured them out that morning now seemed like a stage for horror, the predator's shadow still fresh in everyone's mind. Minutes later, the whine of sirens filled the air as paramedics arrived. A stretcher was brought forward, and Jordan was carefully lifted onto it, his leg wrapped tightly in bandages soaked crimson. The team worked rapidly, inserting lines, monitoring his pulse, and preparing for immediate transport. He was loaded into the ambulance, the doors slamming shut as it sped off toward the hospital. His girlfriend followed in another vehicle, her face pale with shock. Inside the emergency room, doctors fought to save his leg. Deep lacerations had severed tissue, punctured muscles, and fractured bones. Hours of surgery followed, with surgeons piecing together what they could. Though he survived, the damage left permanent scars and the partial loss of muscle function, forcing him into a long road of recovery. News of the attack spread quickly across Hawaii. Reports highlighted the presence of tiger sharks near shore, especially in the warm summer months when they often hunt close to reefs. Experts explained that these predators, capable of sudden bursts of power, were drawn to unexpected splashing or movements that mimicked struggling prey. For many, the attack served as a stark reminder of the risks of entering waters known for large sharks. Jordan's survival was celebrated, but his ordeal left a lasting mark on the community. Fellow surfers gathered in support, organizing fundraisers to cover his medical costs and sharing their gratitude for the bravery of those who had rushed in to fight off the predator. His story spread beyond the island, drawing attention from safety advocates and marine specialists who urged respect and caution in waters where apex hunters roam. For Jordan himself, the path forward became a test of resilience. Physical therapy sessions replaced long surf sessions, his body slowly adapting to the damage left behind. Though his athletic future was uncertain, his determination remained, fueled by the same spirit that had once pushed him into the waves each dawn. The memory of the attack lingered with all who had witnessed it. The sea, both beautiful and dangerous, had revealed its darker side in a violent instant. Jordan's scars became more than injuries. They stood as a reminder of survival, of the strength to endure, and of the raw, unpredictable force of nature that no human could ever fully control.